of a once powerful note.
The good old visual novel. It's one of those genres of games where some people will probably argue with you till the end of time to figure out whether or not they can be classified as a game, and for others a genre of beloved narratives put into packages that allow for everyday people to put their ideas out there for others to enjoy. And just like with regular novels, they got visual novels for every single genre and subgenre that you can think of, ranging from some of the raunchiest and cheesiest rom-coms that some middle-aged Japanese woman has created for her own pleasure, creating a verifiable husbando gooniverse for her and her other dregs of society to consume, or murder mystery killing games that pits some of society's best to do their worst. Personally, while not ragging against my romantically starved queens out there, I will definitely say that I am more predisposed towards murder mystery or horror visual novels, or VNs, such as the Danganronpa games directed by Kazutaka Kodaka, or the Zero Escape or the Somnium Files games developed by Kotaro Uchikoshi, which tend to have an interesting mix of wild-ass characters placed into nefarious killing games, horrific escape room scenarios, or malicious murder mysteries that I can never seem to get enough of. And if only there was some way for my two favorite VN writers to come together and make something stupendous. But thankfully for us, gang, we need to get those mpreg emojis ready because Kodaka and Uchikoshi came together and made a baby in Tookyo Games, a development studio that specializes in all of this weirdo stuff. Which brings us to today's subject in The 100 Line, Last Defense Academy, developed by Tokyo Games, a sort of weirdo, like visual novel, turn-based tactics hybrid that begs the question of what would happen if a studio dumped all their damn money into a Hail Mary game like this. And so, we're gonna figure that question out. But before we do that, since this is a special occasion, if you saw in the video title itself, you know how many hours I put into this game. So, in order to commemorate such a long-ass experience, I got myself something a little bit different than your typical booze. Got myself some Prosecco. Today we have Frizzo Valdobiane right there. So, sorry folks, I'm gonna put my mic down here for a little bit and let's pop this thing open. We only got one shot out of this, so let's pop it. Oh, imagine if I popped this right in front of the camera like that. Wouldn't that be crazy? It just blew everything. Be so upset. And come on. Oh, god damn. Damn, that's pretty damn good. Anyway, let's talk about Last Defense Academy. In the 100 Line Last Defense Academy, you take the role of one Takumi Sumino, just another everyday student living in the everyday dreariness of the Tokyo residential complex, a sort of dome city with his very good everyday gal pal Karuha, until on a fateful day the complex is under attack by weird ass monsters. Within the midst of the chaos, the two friends become separated, only for Takumi to come across a little caked-up robot known as Sirei that hands Takumi a knife to stab himself with and unleash a primordial power found within him. After some hesitation, Takumi stabs himself in the heart with a special knife that awakens his latent, unexplained powers within him and gets sucked into a vortex, leaving poor Karuha behind to pick up the pieces of what has occurred. Takumi soon wakes up in a classroom in a not too dissimilar shot that we have seen many times before in Danganronpa, with a bunch of other students that have been forcibly enforced to Last Defense Academy, with the headmaster being Sirei himself. Soon he gives them all the dire task of protecting the school for 100 days against the vile and barbaric school invaders in order to save humanity from certain extinction. But of course, it can't be that simple, and Takumi is left with numerous mysteries for him to get to the bottom of, ranging between just what in the hell happened to this apocalyptic Earth to this Sirei says he has our best interests in mind, but I think this guy is hiding something. So with that, We're wondering if Takumi has what it takes to get to the bottom of all of this while simultaneously surviving the next 100 days of non-stop onslaught from the vile and barbaric enemy. For the fellas out there that are wondering where the hell did my bottle of Prosecco go, it's just over there off camera, but I transferred a nice amount of it to this humble Moomin mug that I absolutely love to drink my booze out of, because it is my preferred method of conveyance of booze to my mouth. So there you go. Wonderful. But some of you might be wondering, man, oh man, like, this just seems like your typical run-of-the-mill visual novel, and I assure you it is anything but, merely because of the profundity of the experience. Fellas, I cannot exaggerate to you like how deep and long this game can be. So much so that it ended up becoming my verifiable white whale for about 3 months. And that's not just an euphemism for seminal fluid spent. What I mean to say by that is that this game, man, it had me hook, line, and sinker the entire way for 3 months, and I had to get to the bottom of it. But before we get into the narrative, which is the part that I love the most, we gotta talk about the gameplay of Last Defense Academy, and it does a few things quite a bit differently. The gameplay for Last Defense Academy is pretty straightforward to describe and nothing really to write home about, because really fellas, what is there much to say about visual novels other than you click to continue going forward and hear/read what everyone has to say. And while there is one mechanic that I will talk about in the narrative section since it's more pertinent over there, the rest of the gameplay takes its shape in the turn-based tactical battles that you will go through the 100 days at Last Defense Academy. Every so often, the school invaders will breach the protective wall of eternal flames surrounding the school, and it will initiate a defensive battle, where you have to survive not just the onslaught but also protect the shield generator so the invaders can't get into the defense room inside of the academy and destroy whatever is inside, which has been described as something that is the hope of all humanity. In order to fight in these battles, you'll need to use the infuser, which is the dagger of sorts that you use to stab yourself and activate your latent abilities and transform into your class armor, and use the class weapon, which can vary from Takumi's katana or Gaku's minigun, and even some other students like Tsubasa and Takumaru using a Humvee and motorbike respectively. From there, the game goes into an isometric perspective where you control your characters, and tactical turn-based combat where you use each character's strength and weaknesses to defeat the vile and barbaric enemy. Then, every so often, you'll come across the enemy commanders that take different forms. Some, like the first one, will look like some sort of dragon that doles out a lot of damage before biting the dust, and then some others will use a special device to create a thick fog that you'll have to destroy before being able to defeat the commander. And these are just 2 examples because I don't want to spoil any of it. But once the battle is done and all the foes are vanquished, you'll have one final choice to make, and that is who is going to consume the enemy commander. Essentially, when you give out the killing blow to the enemy commander, you gain a lot of their power, and in a very morbid and horrifying scene that shows how each of the characters feels about killing the defenseless enemy, culminating with the enemy turning into a mummified husk.
Exquisite.
Thankfully, after the horror of war subsides and the enemy commander has been absorbed, the character who did the coup de grace will gain an increase to their stats, and you'll be free to continue living your life and advancing to day 100. Basically, the battles are there to kind of break up the monotony of a visual novel, which it does it to varying degrees of success, and we'll get to that here pretty soon. The defensive battles aren't the only change up in the gameplay that you'll come across. The other most common one that you'll find are these little expeditions that you'll occasionally take outside of the school to either find materials to create an item, investigate a location for signs of the enemy, or some other story related reason, and just to do something outside of the school for a little bit. These expeditions are basically the continuation of the Danganronpa like board game side modes that you can play in those games, but this time around you take control of Takumi and a few of his friends as they venture out into the post-apocalyptic world, and with every tile that you land on you have a chance of finding materials, getting into battles with wandering invaders, or many times just getting damaged because somebody didn't jump out of the way from a rolling tire fast enough. And while these little expeditions aren't so bad once or twice, the big issue I find with both the expeditions and the defensive battles is that by the time you get to finishing the game, like I have, you are absolutely 100% done with these two different gameplay modes. Now I get it, the fellas over at Tookyo Games wanted to try something different with the gameplay, and while it's not the deepest tactics games that I have ever played, it generally gets the job done and succeeded in making Last Defense Academy something that isn't Danganronpa. But holy hell fellas, have you seen the title of this damn video? After putting in so many damn hours into this friggin' game, there comes a point where you just want to get on with the story, and while I'll talk about it a little bit more in the narrative section, there is a limit to the novelty of these gameplay sections. Once more fellas, I do have to reiterate in saying that the defensive battles in the expeditions, they aren't bad, you just get tired of it after a little while, but you know what is one aspect of the game that I do not get tired of no matter how many times I've played a Kazutaka Kodaka game? And that is of course the brilliant presentation brought to us by returning collaborators Rui Komatsuzaki and Masafumi Takada, doing the art design and the soundtrack respectively. Starting off, we'll quickly chat about the art of the always wonderful, and I'm sorry if I mispronounce this, Rui Komatsuzaki, which if you are a Kodaka regular, you'll have seen his art through all of the Danganronpa games, and quite a few other productions since both Komatsuzaki and Kodaka are regular collaborators. I'm gonna be real gang in saying that I'm not really that well versed with artistic terms, theory, and character design, so I can't quite pinpoint exactly why, so apologies to the fellas out there that can point it out, but I really love the way that Komatsuzaki creates the design for his characters. Like a small detail that I always find myself enjoying is that the protagonist, and in this case Takumi, are always portrayed as relatively normal looking people that wear just a hoodie or something every day, and then that gets contrasted with some of the other characters that are more out there, such as Takemaru that looks like a biker hooligan, Kyoshika that looks like a typical swordsman but wears sneakers, and my favorite being the tomato head daughter in Kurata that has some incredible expressions with her mask. This in turn contrasts very nicely with some of the other characters that you'll meet along the journey that wear more normal attire, and that has its own implications that would be some pretty big spoilers if I were to go deeper, but I will just say that not everything in this game is as it seems. And of course, we need to talk briefly about our wonderful unassuming egg of a commander in Sirei, because just like Monokuma in Danganronpa or Shinigami in Raincoat, we get another wonderful mascot that blurs the line between someone that can say a line about going to the bathroom and dropping a deuce, and then making you question what is hiding in that little ovoid form of his. Now that is also just one aspect of the presentation, because we also have a characteristically classic soundtrack by Masafumi Takada that sounds a lot like you've heard before, but still has a lot of stuff going on that makes it a little bit different and enough to enjoy. What's funny gang is that the more games that I play where Takada has composed the soundtrack, the more I really appreciate that every soundtrack that he does is unique in their own way, while generally still subscribing to a sort of vibe that I can really dig. Last Defense Academy especially, whether it be because the game is formatted more like a visual novel, it takes a lot of the sound from his work in Danganronpa, where you have tracks like 100 Days that really go a long way to showcase the almost calm monotony of having to go through 100 days to reach the grand conclusion. It has that vibe that while some days might be eventful and some days might be downright horrific, there are also those days where you are just waiting for the hours to whittle away, which this track does a pretty good job at. Another track that I particularly enjoy is the theme for C-Ray, which gets added into the pantheon of mascot tracks that seem to change with every game, but C-Ray's supervision is one that just really fits his character. It's like he's trying to be this peppy, upbeat drill sergeant type of commander, but when the vocals kick in that personally I can't really understand, it alludes to me that there's something much deeper and darker at play. I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that Monokuma's theme for Danganronpa used samples from the Yoruba chant that might point to the language used in series theme, but it could also be a different language entirely. Hell, I've seen some people theorize it might be Swahili with Japanese mixed in, but either way, the fact that Takada can take these influences and make something so unique is always just wonderful. And while certainly not the last track in Last Defense Academy's soundtrack that we'll talk about, there is one track that plays in one of the boss battles that hit me completely by surprise in that I got a friggin' gent jump scare by a track known as Rumble by Pale Dusk, a Japanese progressive metalcore or gent group out of Fukuoka. What's funny is that this comes completely out of left field because nowhere else in the soundtrack is there a track like this. So you just have this one gent song in the entire soundtrack. But to be fair, I would think that the boss that this track plays for would be a supreme gentleman in his own right.
We're not stopping till we're all dead.
But I will talk about one last track that somehow made its way to Last Defense Academy, which is a track that Masafumi Takada has used numerous times in his career, and that is of course Debussy's Clair de Lune. I feel like I have a sort of history with this track, and Takada probably does as well, since it keeps coming up in a lot of his soundtracks, most recently in Danganronpa V3, but even before that he used a rendition of Clair de Lune on strings to be the theme for the safe room in Tango Gameworks' The Evil Within, which is one of my favorite survival horror titles of all time. And every time I hear that song, whether it be in Last Defense Academy or last year's Conscript or in Danganronpa V3, it always brings me all the way back to hearing off in the distance the longing streams calling for a mirror with a reflection cracked that takes you to a bit of safety and respite from the horrors to be found in The Evil Within. The Evil Within. Man oh man, what a classic game, and that would make an awesome retrospective one of these days. But that's a story for another day. But hey, you know what's not a story for another day? And that is of course the narrative for Last Defense Academy. And we should get into it because man oh man, whoo-wee, what a doozy to unpack. Oh brother, where do I even start with the narrative of Last Defense Academy? Well, I guess I will say that for those that witnessed the ending of Danganronpa V3 and understood what it was about, then I will say that Last Defense Academy is basically taking the idea of the conclusion to V3 and putting it into action. In regards to that element of the narrative, I'll get to it soon, but on the whole, Last Defense Academy is a narrative about a bunch of high school kids forced to fight in a war without end, which brings to the big aspects of our narrative, which is the despair of the horrors of armed conflict and all the horrible decisions that need to be made to win it. But with it, we also get the hope that through all the horror, the bloodshed, and the hate spent to fight an existential war, that there is the light at the end for a new beginning. And that light is best showcased with the friends and allies that you make through your 100 days at Last Defense Academy, because in the end, they are the representatives of desperate humanity that you are all connected to. They all have their reasons and motivations for why they stab themselves in the chest to unleash their powers on a vile foe that hopes to extinguish the last of humanity. And it's through discovering their motivations and their little quirks typical of characters written by Kazutaka Kodaka and designed by Rui Komatsuzaki that we grow to love them. Though to start off, I want to talk about the larger themes of the narrative and how in many ways I actually think that Last Defense Academy does the whole hope versus despair shtick a lot better than Danganronpa, because with Danganronpa, and I apologize for dumbing it down like this, it's all about surviving and not trying to get killed, and also about the hope that there is a bottom to this mystery and the despair that is felt by former friends doing something so unimaginably horrible to other people that you also consider dear friends. Last Defense Academy, on the other hand, goes right for the jugular in raising the stakes from a bunch of kids trying to survive a killing game to a bunch of kids trying to survive an onslaught for 100 days with the weight of all humanity on their shoulders, leaving very little room for regret, doubt, and happiness in such a war. Some of the themes that you get to see through the experience can also be pretty damn dark, and even reaches some areas that games like Danganronpa never really entered. Hell, there's particularly one character that in order to get her to, well, let's say comply with the rest of the Special Defense Unit goes through a really horrible experience, and the implications that arise from her in that state is genuinely upsetting. But while it might seem like a relatively straightforward war story like say Valkyria Chronicles, it's actually quite the opposite with Last Defense Academy. There's the overarching mystery of who the invaders are, how did the Earth get to such a state where everything resembles a post-apocalypse, what happened to Takumi's friends and family back at the Tokyo residential complex, and just why did humanity choose these 15 kids as the ultimate weapons in a war without end. And that's just a few mysteries. Under the surface of this game are layers and layers and layers of mysteries, questions, and answers that, as you could probably guess, leads to even more mysteries. And if you're one of the fellas out there that enjoy getting to the bottom of things, then boy, you're gonna get a good one out of Last Defense Academy. Now fellas, I know I've been saying a couple of times how we're gonna get to the full breadth of how long Last Defense Academy is, but don't worry, we're gonna keep that to its own section. So before we get to that, we should talk about the wonderful, weird-ass friggin' characters that Kazutaka Kodaka just loves to create. Fellas, I'm just gonna go out and say it that we have a cast of characters mostly written by Kazutaka Kodaka, and that generally means that most of them are going to be weirdo-ass characters that might test the patience of some people. I.e., what I mean to say is that some of these characters might be annoying as all hell. Now, thankfully, not all the characters are annoying as all hell, but there's the typical selection of tropes that you can readily find in Danganronpa games that find their way into Last Defense Academy. We got the likes of the motorbike-bound hothead Takemaru, the WrestleMania quoting skincare-conscious Moko, the money-grubbing coward Gaku, the military-industrial princess Kurata, and of course the Bushido with high libido and Kyoshika, who does things with the holy Jumanji sword at night that might make even the slimiest gooner blush. Naturally, there's quite a few that I didn't mention because I want to leave the rest of you guys to discover, but rest assured that if you're looking for a game that has its mascot pop into the room, tell everyone they're all cowards, and then announce that he's going to drop a huge deuce, then you're going to have a good bit of fun experiencing what Last Defense Academy's characters have to offer. And I gotta say, gang, that the humor in this game is out of its friggin' mind. There's so many stupid ass quotes and screen caps that I have saved because there just ain't no damn way they actually said that, or damn, he really almost brought out the whole team to ruin just to get a taste of that sweet, sweet curry. A word of warning though, that while the game isn't as sexually explicit as a lot of Danganronpa or the Somnium Files games, there is more than a few moments where the writer's barely disguised fetish is not disguised at all. Matter of fact, it's right in front of you with an open raincoat showcasing the dreaded brainwashing fetish with a giant grin on its face. That being said, it's not the moments when the characters are pointing out how phallic the holy Jumanji sword is that makes them all so interesting, but when eventually that alarm goes off indicating that there's a defensive battle coming up and everyone has to steel themselves for the onslaught that is ahead, that is when Last Defense Academy really shines. It's taking all these characters that you're growing to love and having that all too familiar pit in your stomach that grows with the anticipation that someone might not make it out of this fight alive. that there will be another one of their friends that the gang has to bury, and following that, a shadow of regret and doubt cast over Takumi and whether or not he made the right choice. Each one of our characters has their own way with dealing with the stresses of fighting the invaders and accepting the casualties of war that make them interesting. You'll end up feeling the pain that these poor guys go through in order to save not just themselves, but everyone else that they love and care about in the Tokyo residential complex. It's just one of those things that, like, what happens when someone tells Takumi their hopes and dreams, the world that they want to create, of a time when everyone can go home and live a normal life of a high school kid, and then that life they hope for gets ripped right out of them, all for the dream to disappear in a pool of their own blood as their life slowly seeps out of them. That question and the answer of having to pick up the pieces of what they left behind, as well as every single other mystery that the gang must uncover in this damned world, is what made going through Last Defense Academy so damn satisfying. So with that, gang, it's finally time for me to give the 100-line The Last Defense Academy a very wonderful and deserved 9 out of 10. But there is one elephant in the room that I have been alluding to this entire time, and well, we gotta address it. Usually at this point, I wrap up about talking about the game that I'm reviewing and tell you where you can grab it, but the question at hand is whether or not I actually recommend Last Defense Academy, and the answer is yes, but with the giant asterisk. As I mentioned before, look at the damn title of this video, and that is the crux of where I'm hung up on whether to recommend the game or not. Like, no joke, fellas, it took me a monumental 210 hours to get to what I consider the end of Last Defense Academy, and that of course has to do with its myriad routes and endings. To put it into perspective, the quote-unquote prologue of this game is a solid 40 hours, and after that is when the real game starts for the most of us, in the sense that Takumi gets to make major decisions in the narrative. Now, you might look at me like I have 3 heads, but Last Defense Academy is not your typical visual novel in how it presents the narrative, at least not from what you would be used to with games like Danganronpa. Matter of fact, it takes a lot of inspiration of the works of Uchikoshi, but taken to a ridiculous degree that makes the game feel genuinely endless. But the beauty is that honestly, fellas, you don't have to go through the whole game like I have and reach 100 endings. And generally, I think the prologue and the first main ending, which, let me remind you, is something like 70 hours of gameplay, is frankly more than enough for most people. And I can guarantee you, for the enjoyer of your typical visual novel, that you will leave 100% satisfied at just that. But I'm not your typical visual novel enjoyer, and Last Defense Academy is not your typical visual novel. So God, my friends, and the other games I really should have played be damned. I am going to the bottom of this damn mystery. So just like that, when I saw all the routes and all the endings still empty, still waiting to be unlocked, and their secrets still waiting to be revealed, was the moment that this game became my white whale, and I needed to see where it went. You might even ask me 210 hours later if the whole thing was worth it, and I gotta tell you fellas, you bet your damn ass it was. At least it was for me. Certainly, I will say that it's also a bit obtuse with some of its mechanics. For instance, as mentioned earlier, when you're 100 hours deep into this damn narrative, the last damn thing you want to do is fight another stupid battle or go out on an expedition for materials. And even then, the developers could have cut out some of the fat, but that's sort of what makes the game so different. But honestly, fellas, Last Defense Academy was like prospecting for gold. You'll be going through the motions, listening to the same music and enjoying the same characters, and then when you change a simple decision and get rewarded with a shining gold nugget by stumbling into a different route that changes everything. It could be something as simple as kicking someone out of the damn team and seeing the rest of the narrative from their perspective, or stumbling into a murder mystery route that makes you question whether you're playing a sci-fi game or an explicitly horror game with supernatural shit going on. But my favorite element of all these routes and endings was that you get to really experience what these characters have to offer. You spend so much damn time with them in a way that is deeper than any Danganronpa game that you come to understand what these characters are about and see them go through horrific situations and soul-crushing reveals about who they are and why they are at Last Defense Academy to fight. Hell, without spoiling it, there's a character that sort of fits the player's self-insert / relatively normal person that the player can relate to, that throughout the whole game has been at your side supporting every action, but just because you changed one decision and you wanted to see where this specific line of actions will take you, you get to see her become a remorseless serial killer that will stop at nothing to kill you and the rest of the crew, and that was one of these gold nuggets that made me hop up and down like some sort of Klondike prospector finding the motherlode. But that's just one example. There's so many other routes and endings that are balls to the wall insane that makes you constantly question prior events. It shines new lights into the characters that you didn't care about previously and just adds another thread for you to follow, only for it to split into two and then having to decide just where in the hell it's going to lead next. And it's for those aspects that you would want to keep going. You want to keep going and get to the bottom of the mystery concerning Last Defense Academy and its war against the vile invaders. You want to know why the hell your best buddy in one route was the greatest homie you could imagine and then in another killed their friends without remorse. And you want to see these characters express their feelings for each other and say that they love each other, or you get hit with a reveal that explains what you thought was a plot hole 40 hours prior, and that changes how you look at how events transpired. All of that put together is just a whirlwind of emotions and revelations that makes it almost addicting. Genuinely, fellas, there were so many times in Last Defense Academy that just made me completely reevaluate what I had thought about a character. You might think that this character is cold and cruel until you figure out that they actually have an incredibly caring heart, and the full reveal of what they have suffered breaks your heart. And that happens with so many characters, with so many events, with so many reveals in this story that you wanted to see it to the end. And man, oh man, fellas, it was so worth it to go through this damn game. I like to think the experience of playing Last Defense Academy is like that one image of Charlie from It's Always Sunny in Philly, where he's got like the cork board and all the connections going everywhere with the conspiracy theory, just looking like a kook and just like, you know, like and connecting all the dots here and there and blah, blah, blah. And for like 3 months in a row, I just had like all my friends basically tell me like, man, oh man, like what the hell? Like, why are you still playing this game? And the reason is because like it's such a profoundly deep narrative that when you go digging, you find your little gold nuggets, you find your home runs to find, and it's so gratifying every single time that you do. It feels like you're being vindicated, like it's like, no, it sucks to be them, I learned it. But, you know, you look like a kook the same anyways. But to kind of circle back over to that original thing that I had to say, even if it is a 9 out of 10 game, do I recommend this game for people to enjoy? And the answer is an overwhelming hell yeah, fellas. Are you out of your mind? Of course I still do. Last Defense Academy is certainly not perfect, but I genuinely believe that we have an incredible game, what with the breadth of the narrative, the myriad good and horrible choices, that even the most minor of altered details can change the course of the narrative completely, and a cast of love 'em or hate 'em characters like Kodaka's prior work, but this time around, we actually get the time to sit down and get to know them in a manner that we never could before. For sure, this game is long as hell. It might even be too damn long for most people. But the simple fact of the matter is that with Last Defense Academy, you don't have to experience everything. You could go until your stomach's full of visual novel goodness, or keep the hunt on for the final truth that will consume you like some sort of crazed protagonist in H.P. Lovecraft story. Except this time around, the fishy smell, it's coming from Kyoshika. Now, one way that I have come to describe whether you will enjoy the full breadth of Last Defense Academy is by equating it to the hunt for the truth as if you are wiki surfing. For For those that find it natural to blast hours and hours reading articles only to get to the bottom of Max Rebo's Wikipedia page in the end, will probably find a lot of enjoyment with going through all the different routes and endings, but just be advised that some of these routes are better than others and can be quite a slog to get through. Even then, the level of ambition that Kodaka, Uchikoshi, and friends at Tokyo Games had for creating such a beast is awe-inspiring, and while at the time of writing it seems that all is fine, there was a point where the future of Tokyo Games was put into question since they banked everything on this damn release. But I am grateful that Last Defense Academy got made, since I doubt we'll ever see anything like this ever again. Sorta like I said with Expedition 33, I think we really need to give these ambitious games made by massively talented people that will literally risk everything to release their vision, their magnum opus, and whether or not it might be too long, I'm glad that it was made in the first place so we can all enjoy it in our own little way. But fellas, if the 100-line Last Defense Academy seems really huge and daunting, or you have never played a visual novel before and want to see what all the hubbub is about with this game, then I would very easily recommend that you take a look at Kazutaka Kodaka's other work, such as the Danganronpa games or Master Detective Archives, as well as give some love to the man Kotaro Uchikoshi with the Zero Escape and the Somnium Files games, which are great avenues to dip your toes in before going all in on Last Defense Academy. Finally, the 100-line Last Defense Academy can be found on just at the moment PC and Nintendo Switch, though I believe in time you'll probably be able to grab it on other systems. And you can pick up the game for like €60 or $80 Canadian, and considering the amount of game you get, I think it's a pretty darn fair price. And there you got it, fellas. We finally made it to the end of the Last Defense Academy. Man, oh man. What a crazy experience it was just to go through that entire thing. Like, it was just an odyssey. Like this long, stupid, sometimes drawn out odyssey that I was really glad that I got to go through it, and I'm very grateful that Tokyo Games and Kazutaka Kodaka and Kotaro Uchikoshi, Komatsuzaki, Masafumi Takada, and all the gang and everybody else that I can't name went out and made this game, even if it can be overly ambitious, but it's one of those games that it'll be made, and I don't think there's ever going to be anything like it ever again. So I'm glad that it got made. And on top of that, I'm glad that the studio is doing well and that the game is a success, because man, oh man, if that studio went under, I would be crying my eyes out. But luckily, it's not that way. For all the fellas out there that are new to the channel, hey, welcome to Tomthechosen1. I hope you found something that you're gonna like, because man, oh man, there's a lot of stuff to like out there. And if you made it this far into the video, thank you so much for giving this video a shot. I appreciate every single one of you guys out there that watch my stuff. And so it's nice that you made it all the way out here. And for all the new people that aren't subscribed, hey, maybe go take a look at my other videos and take a watch of those. And, you know, maybe if you like them, then maybe subscribe, because that would be pretty swoos. We got some more stuff coming down the pipeline, don't you worry, fellas, because like we got a retrospective out there for a Halloweeny special that I know you guys are absolutely gonna love. And believe me, there's more stuff coming down the road. There's more Tomcast coming down the road as well. We got one for a sort of a drunkard cast, if you will, where we talk about games that you guys are gonna enjoy. So, but with that, fellas, this is the end of the video, and I gotta leave it to you guys. So this is Tomthechosen1 going out there and saying that in some cultures, cake can be used as a metaphor for a curvaceous and voluptuous woman. And I'm just saying that this is Tomthechosen1. You can call me the baker, because man, oh man, I'm getting that batter ready. So you guys take it easy, and I'll see you next time. Peace.